Welcome to humanity, the epicenter of ideas surrounding transformative change that will revolutionize the way our world interacts with technology.
So Neil, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today, since we've known each other for a number of years and we've never really gotten into the details of the genesis of your involvement with AI and where this all started with in your career. So I'm curious to understand, what was that like when you were at IBM, and what were some of the early things that were going on as you look back 10 years ago, right?
Yeah. I mean, the Jeopardy challenge was nine years ago.
9 years ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was a long time. I mean, it was actually a really exciting time, especially for me, because you think about like these big giant companies like IBM, and you're essentially asked to be part of something where you're going to create, you don't know kind of what, but it's very like startup entrepreneurial type of environment.
Mm-hmm.
And, trying to figure out how a computer could play Jeopardy. And then, you had to agree to the tournament or the challenge 2 years in advance, right? We have no idea if we can do it, right? There's a lot of setup on both sides. And on the night of, it's no secret now, it's like 50-50 who's going to work.
Really?
Yeah.
Actually, I didn't hear that. Okay.
And so, we're all crossing our fingers. And if you've watched the Jeopardy challenge, Watson didn't start out well. It missed 6 of its first 7 questions, if I remember right. And everyone's like on our BlackBerrys going like, oh, might be looking for a new job. But it turned it around and tested how quickly machines can actually learn.
Mm-hmm.
It started doing well. And it was more than just trying to, give the questions to the answers, because it's Jeopardy. There was strategy involved. At one point you see, I think in the second game, you see Watson just jumping around the board trying to find that last daily double, because it knows if it finds it, neither of like the 2 human players could win.
Okay.
Yeah, and then of course Watson wins, or surprise, and then it's kind of the question like, this is amazing, it's a game changer. What are you guys going to do next?
Right.
We're like, well, we'll get back to you.
So what was the thought on like the winning or not? I mean, given that you guys had to back into a goal accepted 2 years prior, what did you guys actually think going into it that the success was going to be?
It was just, could we even do it? Right. I mean, this started off where all great ideas start in a bar. Yeah. At the Yorktown Heights lab, there's actually an IBM bar in there.
Okay.
And there's 3 very smart engineers who were just thinking about what's a great challenge we can try and tackle. And Jeopardy happened to be playing on the TV. And that's what inspired this whole idea.
That is really, I did not know that story. Okay, that's really cool. That's cool. All right. So you guys, the team succeeds and we're able to win Jeopardy. So, and then you guys decided to commercialize this and go to market, right? And so what was it like in those early years when people saw, everybody saw the Jeopardy challenge. A lot of people saw the Jeopardy challenge and saw that Watson was victorious in that. What was it like to try to take this to market at that time for the business community?
It was a huge uphill challenge. I mean, it was a slog, to be honest.
Yeah.
There was a bit of a holy war inside IBM. Like, we have a lot of smart people. Should we build some products we like normally do? Or, I was one of the people advocating, let's open up the platform. Let's create an ecosystem.
Okay.
Right? Let's find partners, let them bring their expertise, help kind of figure out the opportunities, the business case, and help them or empower them build solutions. And ultimately, that was the model that won out. And we went into healthcare first.
Uh-huh.
And one of the big challenges, there was actually several big challenges we actually had. I mean, one, most people didn't believe this was real.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no way a machine could do that. And then they believed it, they're like, well, there's no way a machine can do this as well as, if not better than a person. Right. And then you had a third set of people that were really excited and jazzed, going like, yeah, I want this, not realizing how much work it is to teach an AI something. They just thought Watson knew everything, right? I'll just give it a textbook and it's good to go. It's like, no, it's like teaching a child.
Right.
And so there are a lot of these things. Then you had some of the people, especially the sales sides, that were overhyping things. And, I remember there was a big battle about like, well, we'll use this to cure cancer. And, whoa. Very noble, be a fantastic thing. That's going to take forever to do. Right? Not to say we'll never get there, but maybe we should look at something that's more low-hanging fruit, that has more immediate, tangible value, so people can see what can be done to help and get some, trust built into this so that people want to do more.
Right.
I didn't win that battle, and there were some good things done, but there was a lot of people that felt disappointed. Our partners, a lot of clients felt disappointed because they thought we'll solve cancer in a couple of years, and it's like, well, how many versions of cancer are there?
Right.
How many different stages? Right. The thing about with AI is the variability. More variability, the more teaching, more data you need, and that proved to be a huge challenge, especially in an area where data is the new oil. And a lot of people don't want to share, not even in the healthcare medicine industry.
Right, right. So, I mean, you had to battle it from both sides, right? One side of people that thought it was the silver bullet to solve everything. And then you had the other side where people were like that, not wanting to spend heavy money on budget outlay on something that's relatively new and somewhat unknown in terms of use cases. What were those kind of, if we look back from now, kind of the genesis of that 9-year marker with Watson, Wayne, Jeopardy. What was that like over that period of time? And then we could start to talk about what is it like where it's at now.
It was interesting in that we realized trying to build up this ecosystem, we probably need to find a couple of really good partners. We started off with 3 partners. We started off with WellTalk, Wayblazer, and Pathway Genomics. And we really work with them side by side. We even set up a venture fund to help them capitalize to do this, but to show that the model works and show some success stories. And that was good. And we also realized that we kind of have to tackle this piecemeal. We have to try and figure out the industries that are going to be a little more open, accepting to trying something like this. And the costs are lower to build something that works and will be successful in the market. And so while there was a lot of focus on healthcare, because that's the first thing we picked, the next big thing that really took off was digital marketing.
Okay.
And so a lot of people in marketing and sales were jumping in saying, like, this is great. Like, you can actually target people at an individual level, sign me up.
Yeah. Was that started from internal, your IBM group?
It started externally.
Really?
And we showed kind of a couple of quick successes, and suddenly everybody was jumping in the pool with us. And then out of that, we started seeing actually a lot of traction in talent management. So in HR, what a lot of people wouldn't have thought.
Right.
But they're talking about, will this help me do a better job of recruiting, or at least more efficient job? Help me figure out better team dynamics. So I want to put together a project team, kind of assist me, like, what's going to be the optimal team to put together for good performance. And that also took off. And within about 3-4 years, suddenly we had pretty much every sector or industry trying to do something.
Okay. And so as you guys, I mean, was it like a slow start, or were you guys seeing like steady adoption, or was there any points that were just kind of one major use case in one industry and then everybody wanted a piece of the action?
It's a good question. It depends. Like the typical MBA answer, right? Yeah. You look at like healthcare, it was kind of like, like this little bit slow growth. Digital marketing was like exponentially up right away. Other things, but as a whole, it was kind of a slow rise. But about 2.5 years ago, there was like this inflection point where suddenly everyone would come kind of like, what is this? Does it really work? To, I know I need to be doing something with AI. What is it and how do I get started? And that's where we really saw the growth really uptick.
Yeah.
Where people start realizing that this isn't even just a competitive advantage anymore. If I don't do something, I'm going to be left behind.
Yeah. Gotcha. I think back, when you were talking about Pathway Genomics, I remember being out there, meeting you out, and IBM did a really nice event in Brooklyn, right? There was that big event. Pathway was highlighted there, and that was one of the, was it Clone? What was the hospital provider in New York that was being used as well?
Oh, I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But that was the first World of Watson back in 2015.
Sloan Ketterson?
Sloan Ketterson was one. They were one of the first people we worked with. They developed the AI system using Watson where you could detect cancer from an X-ray.
Yeah, which was interesting because the event itself. So my wife Melissa and I went out there, and she was going out there for that walk because they were doing a major walk through Central Park for a family that had gone through like a certain type of cancer, and then I went there, and then we went to the Watson event, which was great. But it was really cool at that time. I remember it was a really great event. They got a lot of people that were in that kind of startup community, and it had a very like entrepreneurial feel to an IBM event, which was really cool. And then just seeing the focus on the healthcare side, right? When we were out there for that walk too, it was a really memorable experience for me overall too. So you have this gradual adoption and some of these kind of departmental skyrocket impacts like on the marketing side or HR. Where do you see it now? Right, because so much of your time, I know we should talk about your book a little bit too, but so much of it is now is like you educated the market with Watson in the ecosystem. Now you're educating the world on where we're at and where we need to get to. So I'm curious to see what lessons now stand and as you look to go forward and guide people forward.
Well, it's actually interesting in that you always think people, process, technology, and people still tends to be the biggest challenge. It's less so about what can AI do, and this is real or as good as or better than a person anymore, as to people really ask, what should I be doing?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard for them to get in the mindset because we've created a whole new tool set of capabilities. We're so used to automation, right? We look at the computer will help us do something faster, cheaper, less errors. And that only unlocks like 20, 30% of the value from AI. You actually have to get in this mindset about thinking differently, right? Thinking entrepreneurially, whatever you want to call it, to really tap into that innovation or disruptive thinking. And that's where a lot of people actually see struggle. And that's actually one of the reasons I wrote my book,
mm-hmm.
was because, working with, these big companies and some of these startups one-on-one, I'm only helping people make this mind shift so quickly. I realized the book would actually be a great way to try and reach a much broader audience and kind of help accelerate the process across the board.
Mm-hmm.
And I had people actually tell me, like, it's a very noble thing, but you really think that's going to be effective? You think people buy into it? And it's like, well, I got the UN to buy into this mind shift, understand, and, start this whole AI for Good initiative.
Right.
And they did it very quickly. And they're one of the biggest, slowest, most bureaucratic organizations on the face of the planet. And I don't say this to be offensive. They will tell you that themselves, right? But that's how much the making the value apparent and this need to think differently has become so critical. Mm. And you look at like the jobs of tomorrow, it's not so much that we need a bunch of programmers and architects and roboticists that we do. You're seeing more and more people saying, like, we need guys that are really good at philosophy, at the arts, right? We need people that are great thinkers, can think through these thought scenarios, that can think differently, as well as people who can create the experience, right? Because we're living in this more immersive world, and the real differentiator is becoming the experience for people. So even in schools or universities, it's now about student experience,
right.
Instructor experience, parent experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think, when we were at the UCI Law School event, right, that you and Dean Song had put on, and you addressed the group, I remember thinking this was a whole room full of people that were mostly in the law profession, right? A lot of partners there, like local Southern California firms. And you made a statement talking about just the kind of timeline and generation and what the need is, where you're like, Watson was this long ago and, the technology is there. You guys are not, right? So get there to take advantage of it. And I remember it was being I was looking around the room thinking, how are we going to find the thread that's going to weave through with everybody, right? And I thought that was a really interesting statement, right? And so So to that, when you talk to people that don't have a technology background like you and I, and to start to think about how do business leaders start to adopt, what are some things that you are seeing that they're gravitating to or thinking about, or how are you helping them through that journey?
It's a really good question, because I still see quite a few people, they have the mindset, well, I have some really smart technologists right on my staff, employees, consultants. And these are really smart guys. I don't discredit them, but they may not know enough about the problems, the day-to-day ground stuff that's going on, to really tell you how, like, AI or even other emerging technology can help you. I mean, how many technologies are really good? Know the challenge of a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, right? And when it comes to AI, I always talk about like the yin-yang model. Right, the way you're really successful with AI has to be a mesh between the business or domain people and the technologists, with that little dot in each side. Right, the business domain people need to understand a little bit about AI. Right, they don't have to understand like the programming aspect or anything like that, but they have to understand some of the capabilities, kind of what's possible, not possible. Whereas the technologist still needs to understand a little bit about the space, the domain to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you that some of the most successful like AI companies, especially the startups that I've seen, were actually started by people that were not technologists.
Yeah.
Right? They were domain experts, business experts.
Right.
And they were trying to solve a problem, and they really understood the problem, and they were willing to think differently and say, hey, does AI have capabilities to make this a reality? And that's when they partnered with a technologist to build a solution.
Right. Do you think that's a common metaphor for enterprise organizations across the market?
I think it's true for every organization.
Yeah.
In the enterprises, big, medium, small, nonprofits, agencies. And I'm seeing that more and more, especially now the big companies are starting to realize this.
Yeah.
Right? That I can't sit on the sidelines and let some small company try and design something and then I'll just buy them, or I'll just keep automating, or maybe somebody will get lucky and come up with an aha moment. You got to be really proactive about it. So you see more and more of these big companies now trying to engage on how do I do this type of thinking, and more importantly, how do I tap into some of these technologies or consultants that can help me understand the capabilities? How can they help me create that little dot for my business folks?
That's what I was going to go through. Is like, so it's given that our target audience is technology leaders. What does it look like on that for that dot? But their dot on the business acumen side, and how do they inspire the dot creation for their business counterparts?
Well, you got to learn to speak the other person's language, understand some of their pain points, right? As they always say, and that's always why, especially when you hear like consultants, that you have to have some level of industry knowledge. This is why it's so important. There's a great example in that I had a good friend ask me to talk with these guys that designed a new type of movie camera, right? And so I met with them out of courtesy. They were really nice guys. They were talking about how great their movie camera is and all the technology and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, have you talked to any studios? They're like, we talked to a couple of studios. We talked to a couple of directors. They all shot us down. Right? We talked to some VC funds. They shot us down. So we really need help trying to get this moving. And so my very first question, ironically, was the question that basically had killed all their chances everywhere they went. Right? Can you guess what question I asked?
No, but I'm just thinking about them listening right now.
Hopefully they learned the lessons. Right? But I asked them the question, how many movies have you made?
Okay. Yeah.
Right? 0. All right. Have you guys know anything about the movie industry? Nope. Right. We're 3 really smart computer science and engineer guys. I'm like, that's the problem, right? Yeah. You've built this really nice camera, but what kind of angle shots do they use, right, and the motions and all these things? And they're like, well, what difference do those things mean? I'm like, this is why I understand a little bit about how movies make is so important.
Right.
Right. You can't even speak their language because you don't even understand their needs.
Right. Okay. So from a, how do we get your book is part of that your speaking is part of that to get the business community interested to learn on the technical side. So what is the level of knowledge they need to have to start asking the right questions of their team members or their company to figure out ways to leverage these things? It's
just foundational technical knowledge, right? Like if you're talking about AI, you got to understand little things about what is it that AI can do and can't do, and little things about data and training, right? Understand the machine's just not going to know everything, and do I have enough of the data for what I want to do? And if I don't, can I get it? Right? Is it good enough? Some of the other things work, and you work with data scientists, you can work with some machine learning guys and so forth. But to think about the art of the possible, you need to understand a little basics about the technology itself, which is, again, something I did with my book, try to explain things in relatable examples, non-techie terms, because at least I haven't seen much of that. Right. But to make them feel empowered and able that they can do something. Because everyone always talks about, problem solution. And it doesn't really work for AI. I would say my magic formula is really problem, opportunity, solution. Your first step is the mindset, right? Get into that entrepreneurial mindset. Second step is really understand the problem, right? What's the problem, what the real root causes are. And the third step is the domain knowledge, right? What were the constraints? What are the customers? What are the needs? You marry those 3 things together, think, the blue sky type of thing. And you come up with the art of the possible, which we call the opportunities. Then you take the opportunities and you marry in the technical expertise, to say, okay, what's feasible, what's doable, help open doors. By the way, did you know you could actually do this?
Right.
Right. Oh, didn't realize that. Plus then the infrastructure, like, do I need tons of big data? Do I need a 5G connection? Do I need quantum computers? And that's how you arrive at your solution.
So for a typical business leader that's been running an operation of decent size and employee count, what's the timeline that you would say they would need to get up to speed for those fundamentals that you're talking about?
Honestly, not long. Not long. I mean, it kind of depends on how much free time you have, but learning the fundamentals could be a few hours for a couple of weeks.
Okay.
This stuff was not designed to be like you have to be a brain surgeon or a thermonuclear physicist or anything like that.
Right.
Again, it's very foundational. It's like you think about, most of us had to take algebra, right? We may not use it very often, but it's some foundational knowledge about mathematics that we all needed. It's very much the same thing when it comes to AI as well as business domain knowledge.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, that's a good way to frame and think about that. Yeah. All right. Well, so I think it would be good to transition. I mean, we've talked about United Nations and some of your involvement that you've had with the community. I mean, I know I would think of the book that you've written as a way to educate the community, as well as it's kind of a continuation of what I saw you doing when you were working at IBM, right? Just on a very large scale now. Tell us about the things that you're doing with the community. What things are interesting? What things are getting you excited these days in terms of your involvement?
There's quite a few. I mean, locally in Orange County, there's a lot going on. There's City AI, which is a group of trying to build communities of business and technical people together to learn, to figure out solutions. They're, I think, in the top 70 metro markets around the world right now. And, there's a new Orange County chapter that I know that you and the Technosis folks are actually involved in leading, and thank you for that.
Yeah, happy to get that going for the area. We're big believers in Orange County and rising the tide in technology here. So.
But there's a lot of groups in Orange County that are very actively seeking to say, do we have a chance to become a hub for the world in AI? And absolutely.
Yeah.
And that even fits in with the AI roadmap California has. Mm-hmm. What they're doing, and Governor Newsom wants to do is, they want to actually inject AI into public services. They know they'll bring better efficiencies, be able to serve the population. They actually want to reduce AI education, K through 12 in universities.
Okay.
But number 3 is they actually want to be known as a leader for AI throughout the world. And that just doesn't mean like Silicon Valley.
Right.
There's actually a lot of things going on in Orange County right now that people don't know about. And it's very siloed, like, the City AI, for example. And so to try and bridge some of this gap, you have the book, have the Forbes articles, but, I started a podcast called Changing the Story with my co-author, Michael Ashley, to give a chance for people to actually share their stories and show what they're doing so that people will hear their actions and hopefully be inspired to take their own actions.
That's cool.
Everyone's got a story to tell. And one thing I've learned, my experiences and, is the power of storytelling is, to be cliche, really powerful. It's a great motivator. It's a way to actually bring these connections to create this community.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And tell me about your involvement with the United Nations, right? Because that's one of the things that is commonly the first or second bullet point under your name when you announce this. So, because you referenced earlier, they latched onto this concept of AI. Tell me what your involvement was, as well as kind of what the United Nations is looking to do overall. And I believe there was we were working on a local push here before things were shut down. So why don't you walk us through that story?
Sure. So I had the opportunity to speak in front of, the ambassadors, the world leaders, and give a keynote about AI. And I was warned that most of them thought it was Terminator time. This was about 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, nothing unusual back then. So I came and I gave a talk, and I talked about a more optimistic view of AI, but not just what is AI, but how it's actually being used for public service and other opportunities where it could be used to enhance public good and help people. And it apparently resonated really well. People, a lot of the ambassadors were leaders were engaged. There was a reception that night, and I got positive feedback. But so she approached by the Secretary General, and he's like, Neil, your keynote was an eye opener, right? We never really thought that we could actually use this as a tool to help public service. And with the Sustainable Development Goals, and there's back then at least a $7 trillion a year shortfall, trying to make them a reality by 2030. Can we do something here? He's like, I feel there's like something here. There's some momentum behind this. He's like, can we have a conversation next week about it? And we actually did. And really got excited. And so we started talking about how can we do this? How do we build a community to make this happen? And out of those conversations was born the AI for Good initiative, and using AI to drive projects to help make the Sustainable Development Goals a reality. And, one of the first steps was starting the summit to bring people together for community building, share some stories, but to start building people that want to volunteer their time, resources, other things to do good. And, in the span of almost 4 years now, we've had tons of projects go on. And actually there's 116 active projects today around this. So this whole community or ecosystem has really grown. And one of the really interesting things about it morphed even beyond AI. The UN agencies tend to be very siloed historically. This has actually created the need for a partnership among the agencies. So you're starting to see them work together more, but they've also realized they can't do it alone. Which means they've actually improved their outreach and they're growing their community to include industry and academia and other government agencies and nonprofits, NGOs, something that you rarely saw with a lot of the UN work.
And do you think that this is setting the model for that, or like as the groups working together, because they have to have a common vernacular and understanding, right? So my assumption is you're helping to set that baseline across the groups, right?
That's one of my roles as an AI advisor for them, but it's also to actually help them bridge and create this whole community or ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. Again, it's not just the technology that's important; it's the people.
Right.
And we have to try and get the right people in the right buses, Jim Collins would say.
Right.
But that starts with actually getting people to buy in and champion this whole idea we want to do things. So, AI for Good is not a bunch of talking heads or academics talking about great ideas in theory. It's actually a bunch of people creating real solutions.
Right. So where do you see that? I mean, just as a kind of discussion point, I mean, we were at this last year's event. We had a delegation go out there from Technosis, and we started, we got a chance to walk the floor, meet a lot of folks, and there was 3,500 plus folks out in Geneva, right? It was a good turnout.
Yeah, don't tell the fire marshal because we might have been a little above capacity.
Okay.
But yeah, and the only reason it was that number was we were constrained by the size of the venue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so from the idea that the seed that was planted with the group to now, I mean, that was a 3-year period of time, right? From concept to this last event?
Well, now it's been a little over 4 years.
4 years now. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us. I mean, we were working on a local, event, right? So why don't we talk about that? Although we're not going to have it this year, hopefully we'll have it next year. But
well, one of the things that we've been working on, and we were instrumental in a lot of great, leaders within Orange County, business leaders, government leaders, academics, was actually bringing one of these AI for Good summits to North America. And we actually had it set up for September of this year. Obviously, with COVID-19, the UN has canceled all their events for the year.
Yeah.
But it was a very exciting opportunity for Orange County, for the U.S., for North America, to actually bring this here, because you saw on the summit in Geneva, very well attended, but most of the attendees are from Europe and Africa.
Right. U.S. did not have a strong presence there.
Not a strong presence, not a lot from Asia or South America. And, the great thing about Anaheim is that it's a little more centrally located for a lot of these places, that we get a lot more geographic diversity, and it's a much bigger venue. Right. We could actually have hosted a much larger conference and hopefully accomplished a lot more good, got a lot more people engaged, and kind of get a nice spike into, further building out the community.
Right. Right. So do you see that happening next year?
Yeah, the hope is it'll happen next year. I know everyone is still a bit wary, and the UN, like a lot of the other, agencies and companies out there, are not committing to anything next year because unfortunately we don't know when we can have large events again.
Right.
And so everyone's kind of worried about promising something that can't happen.
Right. Right.
But we're all crossing our fingers that it'll happen in the fall of next year.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, I think the one thing that I'd want to share with anybody who's listening, right, is that I know this topic is a difficult thing to evangelize, and having dedicated the better part of 13 years, 15 years pushing that, writing a book and doing this is not an easy thing, nor is it when you cross cultural barriers, work with large enterprises and large organizations like the UN. So, I mean, it's been interesting to see kind of this whole thing evolve with you and seeing you so steadfast in your approach to push this out. So with that, I think it'd be good to wrap up, unless you think there's anything that you would say that the listener would be good to get involved, right? I mean, I think that's probably the best call to action, is if we can drive people to get involved. Because technology adoption, specifically in this, can be used for good. It's not just has to be Terminator, right? So I guess anything you think that would be good for the listeners to think about or to get involved with?
No, it's a great question. And I think there's an opportunity for everybody to do something, whether that's learn, try and build something, part with somebody else. It can be big or small. I think there's something everybody wants to do, and they're having a little trouble finding that match.
Oh.
And I know it's a little bit of work, but it's worth trying to find that match, and it's worth actually trying to look at organizations like CDAI, the Orange County chapter, who can help with that matchmaking.
Yeah.
And I really encourage everyone to do that, because we all know AI is not going to go away. And we always talk about we're in this fourth industrial revolution right now. And what's really driving that is AI.
Yeah.
And if you want to, I hate to say this way, be relevant 10 years from now, when 90% of the stuff will have some AI component to it,
Right.
Now's the time to get started, right? You have the opportunity to be a driver and shape that future, shape it for yourself, your family, your community. Don't waste it, right? Find that, even if it's like one small thing, find that one thing you'd like to do.
Right. And with that, I would plug, I think that's the City AI one's great, because I mean, it's approaching a body of knowledge to learn, acquire it, digest it, and figure out what to do next is somewhat of a daunting task for some, right? But to get involved in a community event and meet people, for some, is another easy approach, right? So anybody interested in joining CDA, we'll make sure to put a link to where you can register. We have an event scheduled that's been somewhat augmented this year, but we're committed to make sure that we evangelize for the community. So with that said, Neil, I want to thank you for joining us and spending the time with us and for sharing your thoughts and stories. Greatly appreciated. And that's it. That's the show. Thank you.